200 years ago, ancestors of the Taunton family moved from the Carolinas to the swamps of the Apalachicola River. They have been here ever since. This is the story of swamp loggers. In 1814, General Andrew Jackson assigned a military unit to this area to protect white settlers from hostile Indians. A group of friendly Indians, the Catawbas, lived inside a fort on this property here at the edge of the swamp.
The Indians, this was a paradise for them, the Catawba Indians. They remained here, and you can see how close we are to that with our children's home now. One of the 5 families was the Scott family. And that was my family on my mother's side. And we've been here ever since. This property actually was deeded to my great-grandfather by President Grover Cleveland. We're part of the terrain, so from here to the swamp's just a little ways down here, and that's been our life. It's just right here in this river swamp. Our grandfather, Saul Van Horn, was on the Board of County Commissioners when this county was carved out of Calhoun County in 1926. He was a master logger. He is still known today for a system of float roads that he created back in the early days of cypress logging, known as the Van Horn Float Roads.
When high water came, the trees were cut down, most often using gator tail saws. These huge trees were sawed or chopped into log lengths so they could be floated through the swamp to the nearest slough. Since transportation was a real challenge, logging camps were constructed as needed near areas where trees were being cut down. Life at these camps, as one can imagine, resulted in a unique culture of its own. In 1957, when David Taunton graduated from high school at age 17, he had dreams of going to college. Being one of 10 living children of Luke and Leola Taunton, to attend college seemed financially impossible. Not for long. Where else to look for help but to the swamps? David borrowed a saw from a neighbor, used the axe from the family woodpile, borrowed $500 from a friend to purchase an old truck, and went into the logging business.
That was what got us started, trying to get money together for me to go to school. And they risked their lives for me to have a chance to go to school.
That's just the way it was. Those days, everybody worked together.
Nobody got paid.
No one.
It's pretty difficult, wasn't it? Considering what you were doing.
We didn't know it was. We just thought that's the way it was.
His brothers, Lamar, 16, and Jerry, 10, joined him to make up their logging crew. They began waterlogging the area near their home place. David sawed the trees down out of a boat with young Jerry as his boatman.
We were sawing this huge white oak tree. It had such a base on it, I sawed it all the way down and it wouldn't fall. So finally a gust of wind came and it blew right back towards the boat. My first thought was Jerry. I turned and said, "Jerry, jump." So he jumped overboard. My next thought was an insane thing. I held on to that saw as long as I could, leaped around, and landed on the stump the tree was falling off from, and got the saw out, and it didn't get wet. And I looked around, Jerry came up, and his eyes were about this big around. He said, "I didn't know you could think underwater."
A year later, enough money had been made waterlogging to get David into college. The logging operation continued on weekends and holidays. After working himself through college and teaching school a couple of years, Lamar dedicated the rest of his life to logging. Logging was good to the Taunton family. They were independent, their own bosses. happy, prosperous, and, for the most part, healthy. Then, in 2006, tragedy struck.
This is a newer version. These chainsaws got turbochargers on it that picks up air off the fly.
You don't know, do you? And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, Lamar's been killed.
Lamar was hit in the head by a falling limb and killed instantly.
I went into a state of shock. I just could not believe it. And throughout the day, people came and talked about it. All the pastors from town came, every one of them. And I think I just went around in a daze.
First thing I had to deal with was, it's all my fault. I got them started doing this when they were just trying to help me get to college. But once I dealt with that, and I got to thinking, probably, all of us are going to have to die one way or another. If Lamar had to choose the way he would have left this old earth, it would have been in the logging, in the swamp.
That was 8 years ago. Today, brothers Jerry, 68, and Johnny, age 65, leave out every morning before daylight, off to the log woods. Deadheading, the process of salvaging by various means virgin cypress logs, some of which were blown down by storms over the centuries. Others were chopped down or sawed over 150 years ago. Many are perfectly preserved.
It's always been something that poor people do, mostly deadheading, as far as that goes, when they couldn't do anything else. It's hard work, and it's hard to make a living at, but it's just something you do if you love it.
The Tauntons also specialize in groundhogging. That process involves salvaging logs in areas where no other machines will go. Now, yet another generation of Tauntons have taken up the logging sawmilling occupation. Jerry's sons, Luke and Pete, along with David's son, Tim, run the family sawmill.
I kind of fell in love with it. Yeah, I've been doing this since 2000, and it's my full-time job, and I'd rather be here than any other place.
Always been a significant part of our history, I guess, and for a few of us, a way of life. Is really a way of life more than a job.
My dad has always been ahead of his time of what he'd done. He was so smart, and he was one of those. He worked hard, but he was a smart worker.
Everybody's got their own style of sawing, their own techniques, their own thoughts about it. So you pick up different things from different people, but probably the biggest difference in mine and theirs is my hours.
You grow up watching your daddy and your uncle pretty much be superheroes. I mean, they work hard. They've worked hard since they can walk. They work, and they worked hard. I didn't grow up working that hard. They'll tell you why, because they didn't want to live the same life that they lived.
And continuing the family logging tradition, David, at age 75, retired educator and judge, is back at it again. Still sawing cypress trees and pulling deadheads. Why? Because it is in the Taunton blood.